I would like to welcome everyone to our first physical review new referee orientation session. I want to thank you all for, first of all, for volunteering to become a referee for our family of journals and for your willingness to participate in this valuable community activity and for taking the time to participate in today's session. My name is Donovan Hall. I've been an editor with PRL for about 18 years, and it's my pleasure to review and approve all of your applications to become referees for the physical review journals. I especially enjoy reading about in your applications what you've written about the value of peer review and how it and what it's meant to you. As an editor, it's really gratifying to learn about just how many of our colleagues benefit from this collective activity, which we editors help to coordinate. So to get started, I'd like to introduce to you today's speakers and panelists. And first, we'll let everyone introduce themselves briefly. You'll say who you are and what you do and something about yourselves. And then once everyone is introduced, then I'll invite each of the panelists to speak briefly on some topics that our attendees today have suggested for us. So to get the introduction started, I'd like to invite Yan Li to begin and introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to see all of you here. My name is Yan Li, and I'm Associate Editor of Physical Review B, which covers condensed matter physics and material physics. I'm also contributing editor of our new open access journal, Physical Review Research. Just a few words about myself. I received my Bachelor of Physics from Beijing University in China and PhD from University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Then I was a postdoc at University of California, Davis, and later worked at the Department of Energy's Brookhaven National Lab as a staff scientist. So my research was primarily focused on electronic structure theory and its applications, and I joined PRB about 6 years ago.
Rocio?
Hello. My name is Rocio Cortez. I'm an associate editor for Physical Review Letters, where I handle papers on several different areas of condensed matter and material physics. I also handle a few other topics, but those are mainly the topics that I handle. I come originally from Spain, where I studied. After that, I moved after I got my PhD, I moved to Berlin, where I was postdoc, and after that, I moved to the US, where I worked at Brookhaven National Lab for 2 years. And after that, I became an editor. So I joined PRL in 2014, and I've been working at PRL since then. So I'm very happy to reply to any question that you might have.
Thank you, Rocio. Dario?
Yeah, hi everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Dario Corradini. I'm originally from Italy. I obtained my PhD in physics in Rome. After that, I did several postdoc positions in Boston and then in Paris. Joined Physical Review X about 6 years ago now, and within Physical Review X, I mostly handle submissions in the areas of statistical physics, soft matter, complex networks, and biophysics. Thank you.
Ansar?
Hi, so my name is Ansar Fiyazuddin. I received my PhD in theoretical physics from Stockholm University. And then I went on to do postdoctoral work at Nordita, the Niels Bohr Institute, Harvard University, and Brandeis University. I then served as a faculty member at Stockholm University and finally at the City University of New York before joining Physical Review D in 2008. And I'm originally from Pakistan.
Thank you. Elena, if you could say a few words about yourself.
Yes, thank you. And hi, everybody. I'm Elena Agnari, and I got my PhD in Parma, which is my home city in Italy, in 2007 in theoretical physics. And then I had some postdocs all around, especially in Paris and Freiburg in Germany. And finally, I got a permanent position in Sapienza in Rome, Italy. where I'm a professor in mathematical physics, and my research themes are mainly on neural networks and disordered statistical mechanics. And I'm joined physical review letters as divisional associate editors a couple of years ago. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'd like to ask our editor-in-chief, Michael Tonneson, to introduce himself and also give an overview of the family of journals that we have here at the Physical Review.
Thank you, Donovan. I just would like to say a quick, brief welcome and thank you. Reinforcing what Donovan said, thank you for volunteering to sign up as referee. The peer review process is an integral part of the scientific process. So give a little bit background of my background, although I know I'm the oldest one of the people being introduced so far, but on the other hand, I'm also the youngest because I have been at the Physical Review Journal for the shortest. I joined about 4 years ago, and prior to that, I was on the faculty of Michigan State University as an experimental nuclear physicist. And from that experience, you can ask my former students, the worst thing you could do is propose an experiment at the accelerator, put in weeks and weeks of preparation, run night shifts, spend 48 hours straight investing in the experiment, do the analysis for half a year or a year, and then not write up the paper. This is just the biggest crime that you can do. So the publication process with the peer review is the last, and I think the ultimate most important step in the scientific process. If you don't publish it at the end, you might as well not have done the whole thing at all. So that's just pointing out how important it is to publish the results of your research and to have quality control to make sure that the readers of the journal and the articles have some trust that what the research is, that it is of high quality and most likely correct. That is the job of the editors in combination with the referee. So you play an extremely important role in this process. So I don't want to take up too much time. I assume you know all the different journals that we have to offer. We try to be as broad as possible, offering the different authors who have different needs and requirements in terms of where they want to publish and what type of journals they want to publish. And we offer a broad range of subscription-based journals, traditional journals, and open access journals, trying to branch out to more and more interdisciplinary physics, because this is where the community is going, evidenced by the changing demographics of the APS, where more and more new, more interdisciplinary topical groups and divisions come up. And so we have to adjust and go with the times and offering these journals to cover those types of physics. With that, from here on, I'm not part of the panelists. I'm going into listening mode, and I hand it over to Donovan. Thank you.
Thank you for those words. Now we're going to move into, I guess, the meat of today's presentation, which when you signed up for this session, we asked you all to propose questions or topics of discussion. And so what we're going to do now is have each of our panelists address some of the topics that you requested us to cover. So each of the panelists will talk briefly about these topics, and then we'll go into some specific questions after that. And I'll have some ground rules for how people can answer, ask questions during this particular, during the session today. So let's get started with that. I would like to invite Yan Li to tell us a little bit more about the value of the peer review process.
Okay, so Warren, can you have the slides up? Thank you. All right, so today I will mostly talk about the value of peer review, which Michael already touched upon briefly just now. Let's first do a little bit of math here. So a typical editor at PRB, which is the journal I work at, handles about 800 papers a year. So some of these manuscripts will be editorially rejected. Let's say 70% of them are sent out for review. On average, each of these manuscripts takes about 2 rounds of review, and each round receives roughly 2 reports. So if you do the math quickly, you will see that that already amounts to roughly 2,200 reports a year for editor. You get a similar number for the total number of submissions and resubmissions that will arrive at our desk each year. So that gives you a sense of the order of magnitude, how often we editors interact with authors and referees each day. And that's not even counting the numerous back and forth communications we have with our authors, referees, and sometimes editorial board members during the review process. And that's on all kinds of issues. For example, we may go back to the referee and ask to make the report a bit more detailed, or we may consult a board member for a very specific concern or technical issue. All these work, most of them at least, is behind a theme from the outside world. And the final decision, either as acceptance or rejection, is usually a result of tremendous collective effort from all the parties involved. That is authors, referees, editors, and board members. And the typical review process may take like one up to several months before a final decision is reached. So you may ask, why do we just simply post the paper on the archive and save all the hassle of reviewing them, right? It will be quick and effortless, and the research result can be immediately accessible by peers and the public. And also, there won't be any unhappy authors or irritated referees. I'm sure that either as referee or authors, some of you have experienced those kind of situations. Well, there are some subfields of science that people just do that. They just post on archive, that's it. However, nowadays, the majority of the scientific community does rely heavily on the peer review for an important critical reason, that is a quality control, which Michael also briefly touched on earlier. And during the review process, it's you, the referees, that's gonna carefully assess the originality and significance of the work, examine the validity and rigor of the scientific method, and also sometimes help to improve the overall quality and presentation of the papers. So having a paper published in the Physical Review Journal family is actually like a stamp, a certification that this work has gone through a rigorous peer review process and is considered by the expert in the field as valid and valued contribution to the scientific community. So that is the core value of peer review. And that's why all the tremendous collective effort from everyone, including authors and referees, are all worthwhile. And by peer reviewing, you also help to maintain the quality of our journals, right? To keep the high standard of publication and to make sure that we have a fair, transparent, and rigorous review process. And as referees, when once the review process is finished, you should really be proud of your input and effort because you have helped make it better, stronger, and more impactful. And even though sometimes the outcome is probably a rejection, but often authors may leave with a positive feeling because the constructive suggestion from the feedbacks of the referees may help them to make the work better or make their future submission more successful. So finally, let me talk about the dual identity we have as scientists. And we have 2 hats, right? Either as authors or referees, depending on the role you're playing in the process. And that sometimes creates some conflicts. As referees, we want the most solid work to be published, while as authors, we want the paper to be out as soon as possible. But we can also turn it around and make use of this dual identity to help improve the quality and effectiveness of the peer review. So think about what you like to benefit from the peer review process as an author. And when you yourself act as referee, try to provide a prompt, helpful, and constructive advice that you would have liked to receive if you were the author. On the other hand, when your own paper is being reviewed or even criticized, think about the valuable time and effort you have put in as a referee in the past, and how you would like to be appreciated, right? Then try to be mindful when you and collegial when responding to different opinions from the referees. So that really helps to make the whole process more constructive. So just remind yourself, regardless whether you're playing a role as the author or referee, that we are all in this on the same team. We are all members of the same scientific community, and we share the same goal, that is to advance and diffuse the scientific knowledge. And high quality peer review is just the right key to achieve that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. Now we're going to ask Rocio to, I guess, tell us more about how the different kinds of peer review that there are. We conduct a particular kind at physical review, but there's all kinds of different ways to do this process. So Rocio, if you could lead us through this maze.
Hi. So, well, the type of peer review that we do at the physical review journals is the most common type of peer review in the science journal, that is called single mass. You will also hear it called single blind. So in this type of peer review, the authors don't know the identity of the referees, but the referees do know the identity of the authors. The reason behind this type of peer review is that anonymity allows referees to criticize the work without being concerned about receiving criticism from the authors, or just get in trouble if, for example, one of the authors of the paper is in a hiring committee or has any decision to make regarding the career of the young referee. On the other hand, knowing the identity of the authors helps referees get a better context for the review for the paper that they are reviewing, because in that way they can easily check previous publication from that group, see how substantial is the advance compared to previous publications of that group of authors. There are also some disadvantages with this type of peer review, and we are aware of them. That, for example, this type of imbalance of anonymity between authors and reviewers might give rise to some biases in the review process. And in order to address those biases, there are other types of peer review that people are trying, and that they are in fact now common in humanities and social sciences, and now they are being tested also in science journals. These other types of peer review are called double mask or triple mask. In double mask peer review, the authors don't know the identity of the referees, and the referees don't know the identity of the authors. And in triple mask peer review, not even the editors know the identity of the authors. So of course, in order to choose referees, somebody needs to know the identity of the authors in order not to consult the authors to review their own paper. So, but this can be done, for example, if the editor who chooses the reviewers is different from the editor that makes the decisions about the paper. On the other side of the spectrum of anonymity, there is what is called open peer review, where everybody knows the identity of everybody. This type of peer review has some disadvantages because referees might not feel comfortable reviewing the paper at all, or they just provide very weak reports just because they don't want to get into problems with the authors of the paper. But I mean, these are different types of peer review that journals are trying nowadays, and it will be very interesting to see how they are received by the community and what kind of advantages and disadvantages publishers find after some time testing these types of peer review. These are not the only types of peer review possible. I mean, this was regarding anonymity, but there is also what is called transparent peer review, where all the reports and all the correspondence between authors, reviewers, and editors gets published when the paper gets published. that's called transparent peer review. And sometimes the reports include the name of the reviewers. So this will be a combination of transparent and open peer review. There is also what is called collaborative peer review, where both all the reviewers involved work together to provide a single report, or they directly collaborate with the author in an interactive way to get the final version of the paper that will be published. Another type of peer review possible is post-publication peer review, where the community gives comments about the paper after it gets published. Of course, this is compatible with all the other kinds of peer review. And something that also makes the review process a bit different between journals are the publication criteria, because some journals only are concerned about the validity of the paper. So, for example, you might know that Scientific Reports does this kind of peer review, that is called sometimes technical peer review, while other journals have, in addition to that, some requirements regarding the novelty and the importance of the work. And I won't have time to talk about the advantages and disadvantages of all this kind of peer review, but if you are interested, just feel free to ask. And as I said, the type of peer review that we do at the physical review journals is single mass, but I think it's good that you know that there are also these other types of peer review out there. Thank you.
Thank you for those that explanation, Rocio. Another thing that you'll be asked by editors is to evaluate a paper according to the journal standards. I'd like to invite Dario to help us with understanding what the journal standards are.
Yeah, thank you, Donovan. So I'm going to talk about how to evaluate a scientific paper, or if we want to rephrase, what editors are looking in a referee report. So we can say that evaluating a paper can be done both in an objective and a subjective way, or better, it contains an objective and a subjective component. So let's start with the objective component, because it's the easiest if you want, because this is common to most journals, and it's mostly the referee's responsibility. So the editors of most journals would ask the referee's opinion on the technical validity of the results, their novelty with respect to the previous literature, on whether the conclusions are supported by enough evidence and are compellingly articulated in the manuscript, and generally speaking, always comment on the presentation and the clarity for the readership of the journal are always welcome. For journals in the areas of life sciences, the editors may ask the referees about whether technical standards have been upheld. But then there is a subjective component in the evaluation of a paper. Warren, can you please go to the next slide? And this is, Warren, next slide, please. All right, welcome. There it goes. So the subjective component is a shared responsibility between the editors and the referees. As you may know, the editors first make their subjective evaluation in order to decide whether to send a manuscript out for review or not. And we do this by reading the paper, the cover letter, looking at previous publications, related papers, and sometimes we also consult with our own board members. When editors do decide to send the paper out for review, they ask the referee's opinion on a paper's importance, breadth, and potential impact. And I will come back to this concept in a minute, but just let me say up front, these obviously are not concepts that can be quantified with a number, but are better thought, if you want, maybe as a gauge on a continuous scale. So you may ask why the referees even ask the opinion of editors even ask the referee's opinion about the subjective criteria. Why then don't make the decision themselves? Well, first of all, the referees are the technical experts in the topics of the paper, but they also represent the opinion of the community. And at the end of the day, they are the end users if you want the results presented. So the referee's opinion is fundamental here. I cannot stress enough here one thing, that different journals have different selection criteria regarding importance, breadth, and potential impact. So it's very important that you make sure what those criteria are for the journal that asks you to review the article in order for you to make an informed subjective judgment. So where to find this information? Well, most likely this information is up there in the website of the journal, or it's included in the review request that the journal sent you. But in case of doubt, in case you don't know how to figure out this information, don't hesitate to ask the editors about what are the criteria that the journal is using to evaluate the subjective component of the paper. So coming back to those indicators or concepts, if you want, what do we mean by importance of a paper? Well, essentially, this is related to how big is the advance paper reports with respect to what was previously known according to the previous literature. So a paper may report an advance that is fairly marginal with respect to what was previously known, may report an advance that is instead substantive, or even one that is transformative of a given area. Finally, also, although this is fairly rare, may report an advance that is a contribution to all of physics. And so again, you can see you cannot really assign a number on the importance of a paper, but you can place it on this scale that I just sketched in a sort of fluid way. What do we mean by breadth? Here, the question regards the potential readership of the work. For example, a paper can be addressed to a small niche of researchers, or maybe it's something that should be of interest to most people working in a given area, or perhaps something that all people in a given area should actually read, or as we said before, even although this is rare, something that all physicists should be informed of and interested in. Again, you cannot say how many people exactly would be interested by that work, but you can more or less place it in this continuous scale. And finally, potential impact. Perhaps this is the most difficult to judge, because impact can come in many different ways and a combination of the different things that we said before. For example, a paper may be of interest only to a limited readership, people who work in a very specific area. However, in that context, the work may be of the transformative type, so that most people in the area will make use of the results. So this also can be a very impactful paper. Another way to be impactful could be linking different areas of physics or even of science in general. And thanks to those connections, bringing out illuminating insight that it was not possible to obtain before by considering the two areas separately. So again, we all see, this is a sort of subjective criteria, as we said before, and there is no uniform way to judge it, to judge them. And this is something that is done in cooperation between the editors and the referees. And again, as I said before, it's very important to understand what are the criteria of the different journals regarding those qualifiers. And in case of doubt, it's also very important to check with the editors so that there are no misunderstandings between the editors and the referees, and eventually, the editors can make the best informed decision possible about the paper. Thank you.
Thank you for those words, Dario. Since evaluating a paper involves subjective criteria, and these decisions that we make often affect people's careers, there are obviously some ethical considerations that come in with when you're refereeing. So I'd like to invite Ansar to say a few things about the ethical considerations of the peer review process.
Thanks, Donovan. So I'm going to speak about ethics and reviewing. So I like to think of scientific review as a scholarly exchange, and an exchange really can only occur between equals, and that's kind of implicit in the terminology of peer review. Secondly, there's another distinct role that the referee plays, and the referee stands in for the community of researchers that that the referee belongs to, and in a particular field of research, but also for the journal itself, which is trying to maintain some set of standards. So those are two distinct roles that the referee assumes. So thinking of the referee and the review in this way, it brings up some ethical issues that we should keep in mind, and I'll go over 4 points. The first two relate to the first aspect of it as sort of an exchange of equals between equals, and the second as stand-ins for the community and the journal. Next slide, please. So the first point I want to raise is that so when you think of it as an exchange between equals, the referee can easily imagine themselves being on the other side of this as authors. They should find ways of expressing themselves that are that don't cause the authors distress or feel disrespected. And sort of, a couple of elementary ways in which one can go about this is don't make any assumptions about the authors, their circumstances. For instance, one common thing is that people make assumptions about the gender identity of the author, for which we have no access unless the author specifies themselves in a particular way. So that's something to think about. Really, your report should be focused on, you're there to evaluate the paper on sort of scientific grounds. So you should limit yourself to that. You should express yourself in a respectful way that's not demeaning, and really just focus on the scientific substance of these objections. And there's actually a very nice editorial that Michael Tennyson, who just spoke earlier, our editor-in-chief, wrote for us, and you can find it on the journal website. And of course, like, these same considerations apply if you're an author and you're responding to a referee. You should respond respectfully and not make assumptions about them. And there are too, like, you often see people making assumptions about their gender identity and things of that nature. So the second point I want to make is that we live in a world in which there's a lot of inequality, and that's expressed sort of in this ideological form as biases that are, a product of society trying to justify these social inequalities. As scientists, we're not immune to this. We're really just just citizens of the world, just like everybody else. And so, gender, race, ethnicity, sexuality, national origin, and other lines along which people are categorized are often sort of the basis of, prejudices that, we may have. So we should be aware of this in general and try to keep our own implicit biases in check when reviewing. And one way to try to address this is that when you write a referee report, you should ask yourself, like, would you express yourself in the same way if the the authors came from somewhere else or had a different name, those kinds of things. So those are important things to think about when you're writing your reports. The third point I want to make is related to the fact that the referee is standing in for the community and for the journal. Is that we have to try to maintain a high level of objectivity, and so we should try to avoid situations where you might have some prejudices, whether you're either in favor of or against a manuscript on sort of non-scientific personal grounds. And so, for instance, you shouldn't review papers that are written by your friends, colleagues, or close collaborators. Those are in situations where you might be favorably disposed. And on the other hand, you shouldn't review papers from rival research groups in which you're actively trying to compete. Those are both the kinds of circumstances that you should try to avoid. And if you're asked to review a paper from one of these groups, you should decline the request and explain yourself. And as authors, you should make us aware of any sort of conflicts of interest that you're aware of, like for instance, rival researchers and so on. Okay, and then my final point is when you're reviewing a paper and you become of unethical behavior, please let us know. So in the case of as a referee, if you notice that, for instance, there's plagiarized text in a paper, or there's an unattributed use of material like data or figures, or other behavior that's not compatible with scholarly integrity, you should make us aware of it. And in the case of, so that's unethical behavior on the part of authors. In the case of referees, this can happen where that sometimes, not very often, but this is something to watch out for, is that referees shouldn't try to delay the review because they have a rival publication that's also in the process of being reviewed, and that kind of thing. So so those are the kinds of issues that can arise that we should be aware of. So in conclusion, as reviewers and authors, we can take simple steps to maintain high standards of publication ethics. But instead of thinking of ethics as a set of formal steps or rules, we should really try to keep in mind sort of the larger project of creating a better world of scientific publication that's a service to the entire international community of scientists. I'll end there. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much for those words. It's very inspiring. Now I would like to invite, I think that's actually a good introduction for inviting Elena to say more about her career path and how, as someone in the community, peer review has been influential or important in her own career. As you know, physical review is a community-run or community-driven set of journals. So we have members of the community who advise us, and Elena's been on the PRL editorial board advising us as to what to do. So I'd like to find out what she has to say about her experiences.
Okay, yes. Thank you very much. It is a pleasure for me to share my experience as a referee and as a divisional associate editor. As I said, I joined FISREV Letters in 2019 as a divisional editor, and I was formally selected as an outstanding referee for the American Physical Society and for the Institute of Physics. And I still remember very clearly the first time that I served as a referee. I was a PhD student, and I remember that I had no idea what to do. And so I asked to my PhD supervisor or to other colleagues, and basically the reply was, well, read the paper and then write a report where you list the points that you didn't understand. And it sounded very easy, but actually it wasn't. I read the paper and I was overwhelmed by points that I couldn't understand. And so I started to go into the paper to read all the related literature, and it took me a lot of efforts and time to finally write a report. And I don't think that in the end it was very useful, neither for the authors nor for the editor, because the attitude was that I had to show that I deserved the role of a referee, that I was smart enough to understand the paper and to provide insightful suggestions to the author. So it was a report written for myself, just to show that I was good, but not for the authors or for the editors. I've learned how to write better reports thanks to those that I received as an author. And so I realized that the most useful reports are those that raise criticisms and that let the authors to improve the paper, to improve the accuracy of their results and the accessibility of their results. Possibly also reports that highlight serious weaknesses and possibly that reject the paper and avoid to spread bad science. So the goal is not to show off as a smart guy, but to provide clear feedback to the authors and to the editor, so that the authors, in principle, can disseminate good science. This is the goal for me. And according to my experience, the referee doesn't have to understand all the very details, the tiny details of a manuscript. He is selected because he or she is an expert in the field and a potential reader. So he or she can report on the suitability of the manuscript, whether results are important enough, as Dario said before, whether the investigation was accurate, whether motivations are strong enough, and so on. So my recommendation for future referees is not to be afraid of looking dumb if you ask for clarifications. Of course, for the authors, everything is trivial because they did it and they have been working on that for months or maybe years. But these clarifications that you are asking, if of course motivated and clearly stated, are fundamental to check whether the whole investigation was led correctly. And sometimes, as an author, I'm asked to provide more details and more clarification. And then I realized that there was something that was not completely clear to me, and it was worth further investigations. And as I said, don't be afraid to ask for clarifications, because if the authors will find that what you are asking is not worth of changes in the manuscript, they can simply reply and provide clarification in their rebuttal letter. So, as I said, I had the chance to cover different roles in the reviewing process, and this made me aware of different perspectives and on the fact that in your report, you are conveying information to the authors, but also to the editors. And the final decisions, of course, rests with the editors. So they need reliable reports and clear statements. If you accept a paper as it is at the first round without asking for changes and without supporting why you're recommending this paper as it is, then in my opinion, this doesn't ensure enough information to support publication. And analogously, if you reject a paper, but your report is too vague or not sufficiently motivated, then maybe the author will need to look for additional references. And this makes the process more difficult, because then it is harder to converge, to find a synthesis. So just to recap what I said, I will summarize the steps that I follow when I received the request of a referee report. I'm not stating that this is the best practice ever, not at all. This is just an example, not the example, an example, a simple example. So first, I read the title, the abstract, and scroll the text, read some sentences randomly to get an overall idea, and I decide whether to accept the invitation or not, based on how much time I have in that moment. And of course, in this decision, it matters the overlap of the paper with my research field, and also how good is the paper, because if the paper is already well done, my efforts will be lower. And I try to answer to the editor in maximum a couple of days, so that if I can't accept the invitation, the editors can swiftly move on. And in that occasion, I also provide the editor with an expected time for submitting my report. I think that it can be helpful for the editors to organize their work. And then when I write my report, I usually start with a very short summary in very simple words. I mean, what the authors found, why it is important, and which kind of techniques they used. And without any technicism, formulas, just it is helpful for me because it allows me to understand whether I got the point. Just summarize in 3 lines. And then I provide some qualitative comments about the broadness of results, about whether they are compatible with the journal scope, whether their significance is compatible with the journal reputation, about clarity, and so on. And then technical points start, and I list the points which, in my opinion, requires an action by the authors. And in that part, I try to be very sharp in my request, so that the authors knows exactly what they have to do, according to my opinion. So for instance, I avoid vague statements like improve this part or improve your results. No, insert some lines to describe with more details this concept in section 3. Improve your estimates by running more simulations. Check passages in formula 3 and 4, and so on. Sharp statement, sharp actions, and I usually state also whether the change that I'm asking is mandatory, at least for me, or it is left as optional. And finally, I formulate a judgment like minor, moderate, or major revisions, or reject. In case of rejection, I spend much more attention in justifying my decision and in explaining my criticisms so that they are not open to possible challenges. And then I send to the editor.
Okay, great. Wow, that's a lot of really good information there. Thank you for that. Now, I'd like to transition into the the formal Q&A part, where we're taking questions from our participants today. And we have quite a few already, and we have about 15 minutes left in our session. So let's try to get to all of them. I had one particular question I wanted to ask the panelists about, because it is actually I've been doing the adding volunteer referees to the database for many years now, and the one thing that everybody asks is, when am I going to get my first referral? I've signed up, I'm excited, I want to review a paper. When is the editor going to send me a paper? So I'd like our panelists maybe to say something very brief about how we go about selecting referees as editors. So if I could maybe impose on Jan and Ansar to say something about physical review, and then Dario and Rocio could say a few things about PRL and PRX selection criteria.
Thank you, Donovan, for asking this question, because I got these questions very often as well. One way you can do, because there are multiple channels we select reference, right? We look at the author suggestions, we look at who are the authors of most relevant references cited by the paper. We also search by your expertise and record. So one thing that you may want, that you can do already to help getting the first referral is to update your expertise description, putting as many keywords as you like, what kind of system you're most interested in reviewing, what kind of methodology, and what kind of clinical phenomena you are researching in. And also the other thing that you can do is to make sure that your senior colleagues, like your advisor or other coworkers, know that you are eager to help to review. So they will think about you when they get a referral. Either they can send a joint report with you, or they will think, oh, I'm so busy, so why don't I just give it to this student or postdoc who's very eager to start and the first referral. So that's two ways that you can already do to help enhancing the chance. So let other people to add more comments.
Yeah, I think Jan covered everything I was going to say, so thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is what I do is I look at your publication record. So essentially, if I see that you publish in the past in topics that match with the submission that I have at hand, that always, signals that there is a potential match there. So updating either your personal website with, your publication or your Google Scholar page, that's something that is helpful. I don't think there is a lot of difference between less selective and more selective journals in terms of how they select papers, in terms of their topic suitability. Maybe for more selective journals in particular cases, we may want to consult with somebody who's more seasoned, if you want, simply because they may have sort of a longer view of that topical area and, can help us make that subjective judgment that we were talking about before.
I don't think there are also big differences how we choose the reference of physical review letters. Sometimes we might be interested in the point of view of somebody who is not really in the field, but we think that they might be interested in the paper, or the authors claim that these readers will be interested in this paper. So in that case, it's good to have an additional opinion about, is this really interesting for this field, or is it understandable? But other than that, I think we choose the referees in the same way as the other physical review journals.
Excellent. I just wanted to say that when you're submitting a paper to us as an author, you can tell the editors handling your paper that you're really interested in reviewing and to send you papers to review. That's a really good way to communicate with us directly. So we are getting down to the last 10 minutes here, and I'd like to get into the questions that have been submitted today because we have a lot of really good ones. I'll go in order here, and I'd like I'll try to direct them to the appropriate panelist, and let's try to keep our answers short because we have several to get through. So Feifei Huang asks, what's the best to do if I come across a manuscript that borders on self-plagiarism? So I guess that Ansar, could you say something briefly about self-plagiarism?
Yeah. So self-plagiarism is something quite common. We do, if we encounter it, we tell the authors to try to reformulate the text. It's of course, not very ethical behavior to, but it's of course much worse to plagiarize from others. So we try to get people to, in those cases, reformulate. Whereas if they were copying from somebody else, that's a much more serious charge.
Okay, the second question is from Amitava. As referees, we often do not get to reproduce results ourselves, but have to rely on the honesty of the authors. What is the ideal way to deal with this uncertainty? Any of the panelists want to jump on this, or shall I just pick randomly? Okay, so Jan, you talked about it.
Right. So reproducibility is definitely a very big issue. I handle most of the manuscript that's on computational physics. So in those cases, if the code is already known and the methodology is established, then we, as referees, you can ask the authors putting as much details for people to reproduce these results, right? What is energy cutoff? What is the supercell size, for example? These are just very, well, I'm talking about a particular case like doing a computational calculation for a system. But beyond that, we do have to put a lot of trust on the author themselves. But one thing that we can rest assured is that even if some wrong results are published, there are ways to correct it afterwards. We do have comment and reply. We have corrections, we have erratums, all these other format of article types that allow the community to spot an error and make sure that the correct message is known to the community. So there are other mechanisms to help making sure that we don't get the wrong message out to the world.
Okay, the next question is from Rabin Mahat. If a referee says acceptance with minor revision in the first round of review, but after looking at the referee's comments in the second round of review, can they change their stance? Is this not bias? Rocio, would you like to field that one?
Yeah, so when we talk about bias, we usually talk about factors that influence the review process that are not strictly scientific. In this particular case, it might happen that the other reviewer didn't recommend publication because there are other papers that have been published recently that already had published that. And the referee who recommended publication was not aware of those papers. So in the second round, maybe he or she realized that that paper was something similar had already been published. So then that referee changes the recommendation. So I don't think that's bias, but more that additional scientific information is provided, and that referee, is the right thing to do to reevaluate the recommendation with the new information. In any case, if you ever are in this situation and you feel that you should change your recommendation in the second round of review in any direction, it's good that you explain why you are changing your recommendation. If there is another paper, there must be a rationale behind that, not just saying, oh, the other referee report seems very well written, then okay, I will just follow that. There needs to be a good reason, and if there is not a reason, it's likely that we might go back and ask you to explain your change of recommendation.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to direct the next question to Dario. It's from Amo Patwadan. If as a referee you don't understand certain aspects of the paper, is it acceptable to consult a colleague about it?
It is acceptable in general, but we would prefer that you let us know. And the sense you can tell us after you receive our review request, you can tell us, well, there are certain aspects. I'm proficient, generally speaking, on this paper. I know this topic, but there are certain particular aspects I may want to check with a colleague of mine, and his or her name is, So first of all, for a couple of reasons. One is because we have it in our database for completeness of our records. And second, also to make sure that the person you consult with is not a close collaborator of the authors or somebody who may have some conflict of interest with the authors. So yes, in general it can be done, but it's always recommendable to alert the editors about it.
Great, thank you. The next one is actually for Ansar. It's from Chengan Lee. If I feel the authors show some disrespectful attitudes or words to or reports on a manuscript, how should I respond properly?
Yeah, so if we get a report that's written in a disrespectful way or that we perceive to be disrespectful, we'll ask the referee to either reformulate themselves or if it's something very simple, we might actually make that change ourselves. For instance, gender identity, or like if they say something like, this could be written by an undergraduate or something like that, we might just remove that part. Yeah, if you receive a report that's disrespectful, please let us know if it, if we didn't attend to it ourselves. Conversely, if the authors are expressing themselves disrespectfully towards referees, I think it's let us know and we will try to address it. We do often intervene in those cases. Like if we notice that an author is being disrespectful, we'll go back to the author and say, please express yourself in a more respectful way.
Great, excellent. The next question actually is quite popular with the attendees, and it is directed to Rocio, who's the expert in different types of peer review. So it's Maxine Fabier, who asks, don't you feel that it can introduce a bias in the process since big names, the single blind process here, since big names in a field can have a higher chance of publishing a given paper simply because of their reputation? And he adds, I understand that single blind makes life easier for reviewers, but wouldn't double blind method make it that better sense?
Yep. As I mentioned very briefly, the reason why several journals and other publishers are considering the double-blind peer review system is to try to avoid that kind of bias. It also has some disadvantages because, first, the anonymity of the authors might often be an illusion, especially in physics, where people often publish papers on arXiv, and it's a good thing that people post preprints on arXiv, but then how do you hide your identity if your paper is on arXiv? Also, it's good that the reviewers, even if the reviewer doesn't want to find the identity of the author, it's good that the reviewer goes to arXiv and see what is on arXiv and closely related topics. So even if the reviewer is not looking for the identity, they might find the identity of the authors on arXiv. Also, some experimental papers, it's not that difficult to guess where the paper comes from because of the experimental setup that was used. That's one of the potential disadvantages of the double blind. Another disadvantage is that if the referees don't know the identity of the authors, they might miss some previous publications. So it's not a matter of making the life of the reviewer easier, but providing a better quality of the review, because the reviewer might miss some context. Those are the biggest disadvantages of the double-blind peer review. It's unclear. Maybe the advantages are bigger than the disadvantages. This is something that remains to be seen, but this is what people out there are considering.
Great, thank you. I know it's 11 o'clock now, and we advertised that we were going to end at 11, but it's been proposed, since we have so many questions coming in, that we extend a little bit. I hope this is not an inconvenience to anyone. If you have to go, I understand, but we have, like I said, questions coming in very quickly. So I think the next question that comes up, I can ask Elena about this, since she talked about how to construct a referee report. David Curcio wants to know, what's the longest reasonable referee report report a referee is expected to send, roughly, I mean?
In terms of points that I ask to adjust, I reached, I think, 15. Of course, there should be a balance. If there are too many points that needs to be fixed, maybe you should suggest the author to withdraw the paper and maybe revise it before and resubmit later. But in general, I think that a long report is actually a favor that you're doing to the author, because the author have a more precise feedback on which are the weak points of his manuscript. So based on my experience, a referee report that is 4 pages long is the maximum that I have ever seen. And a number of points up to 20, I think it is still acceptable. I don't know if I answered.
No, it's fine. Thank you. The next question has to do with PRL's length limit. So maybe Rocio, you could field this one, and actually it's a good opportunity for us to remind the community too that rapid communications has changed to letters and the length requirements there. So maybe one of the Jan or Ansar would want to comment about that. The question is from Luis Emilio Guerrero, who says, I've noticed that PRL limits their articles to 4 pages. Why is this? And how does this page limit apply to letters in the other journals?
So, well, PRL, first I would like to clarify that PRL's length limit is not 4 pages, is 3750 words. Not, and we don't count the title, the authors, the affiliations, the abstract, the acknowledgement, or the references. So it's just the text of the paper, the caption of the figures, and the figures and tables. We calculate a word equivalent for the figures and the tables, and also the equations, and that's how we get our length limit. We have a length limit because we publish papers that by definition are short, well focused, and people, this is one of the reasons why many people like PRL, is because there are papers that in principle you can read more or less quickly and get an idea of a very important result. So we feel that we need to have a length limit. We are also not that strict. I mean, we are usually very strict in the beginning of the review process, but by the end of the process, if we feel that the paper we are going to publish it and it's a very important paper and a bit more of length is needed, we can add that. So it's not that strict. I mean, in the beginning it is, because we know that the paper after the review process often get longer. So yeah, that's how we count the length.
Great. Did either Jan or Ansar want to say something about letters in the physical review?
I can just quickly add that in topical physical review journals, the length limit is a bit more generous. Our word limit is 4,500. So you can add some more words if you have a paper rejected from PRL and want to transfer to one of the letter sections of the physical review journals. Then you do have some freedom to add more information. We know that happens very often when referees review the paper and say, oh, that can be more comprehensive. Maybe you should add some more information. and you may still be able to qualify your paper as a letter. So in that sense.
Okay, great. The next question is from Jay Lee. How do PRL referees and editors determine whether a manuscript is broadly interesting or appeals to a broad audience? I guess Rocio, did you?
Well, first, I would like to clarify that the broad interest is not the only criteria to publish a paper in PRL. This is one of the possible criteria, but if a paper is really, really important in a particular field and it will change completely that field, even if it's all interesting to people within that field, we would like to publish that paper. So just not every paper published in PRL has very broad interest. But the narrower is the interest, the biggest importance of the paper needs to be. And we determine the broad interest just considering how many labs, how many groups will change the research because after reading that paper. I mean, if a paper is, okay, this is useful to people in the field, then it's not broad interest. If it will give ideas and people in different fields from the paper will be interested in the paper, then it has broad interest. Yeah, but as I said, that's not the only criteria, and often there is some misunderstanding about this with the PRL papers.
Great. There's also a related question about PRL criteria. I was wondering if, as a board member, Elena could share with us how her view of PRL's criteria and how you approach it as a divisional associate editor.
Yes. Yes. Of course, this part of judgment implies a subjective aspect, and but trying to be objective, I think that an impactful paper is a paper which reports a result, which provides a big step in a certain field, either a broad field or narrow field, but the step must be important. It's not just a refinement of previous results or a variations on theme. It opens, it may open a new perspective on a field. It can bridge different disciplines, or it can solve a long-standing problem, or it can provide new techniques, new tools for solving a certain problem. These are the points that I have in mind when I judge the impactful of a manuscript.
Great. The next question is from Jean-Marc Martin. He asks, hello, what could be considered a reasonable amount of time for to peer review a paper, and how should a referee proceed when decision-making, accepting and rejecting a paper is not obvious? Dario, would you mind commenting on that?
Of course. Regarding the time, this is really field dependent if you want. In physics, generally, the accepted norm is something about from 4 to 6 weeks, maybe up to 8 weeks. Some journals will ask you to indicate a target time for your report, so you can indicate that. But I mean, generally in physics, more than 2 months starts to be a little bit much. Just to give you some context, I've contacted some referees in the area of statistics and mathematics, or even economics, and they are used to having 6 months or 1 year turnaround time. So it's kind of a little bit field dependent. And in that case, I had to explain, well, in physics, we also have this other norm. So maybe can you please send us your report earlier than than that. Other areas are even faster. In biology, they're used to reports in a couple of weeks or something like this. So it's a little bit field dependent. Second question, also a very good one. What should you do if the recommendation is not obvious? Well, you can just say it. You can say, well, you can explain to the editors, I cannot make a definite recommendation. I think there are good reasons why this paper could be accepted in your journal, and these reasons are 1, 2, 3. But there also, I see also points why the paper may not be suitable for your journals, and those are 1, 2, 3. So what do we do with the information? Well, if it's not clear, first of all, we can come back to you and ask you to explain, or we can weight it with the other reports we get and the other contextual information we get. So we put it together with the other information, and then also, if it's a first round, we can send the reports back to the authors, and can you please address those comments and see the rebuttal and see how the process evolves.
Great, thank you. We're getting a little well over time here, so I'm going to have to say, well, this is going to be the last question for our panelists, and then we'll close. I know we have more questions here, but what we'll hopefully in the future we'll have more of these sessions, and we can and answer more questions. So the last one will be for Ansar, since it involves ethical questions. It's from Rabin Mahat. If a referee makes comments that are unethical or against ethical standards, how does an editor handle this issue? Are there any penalties for referees?
Yeah, that's a very broad question. So it depends on the nature of the breach of ethics. So, for instance, as I was saying, like if there's unwarranted assumptions of gender and things like that, those can easily be fixed. Like so if they use male pronouns or whatever, we could ask either the referee to change them or change them ourselves. But if it's something more serious, then we do take note of it. For instance, if we notice that there's a competing paper by the referee that's being under consideration, and the referee is seems to be delaying things, we will make a note of that and try to intervene in a situation like that, and keep that in mind for the future. We do keep notes on referees, with the quality of their work and other aspects of how they how they behave. So it really depends on the situation. But yes, we do intervene. We don't have penalties as such. I mean, there's nothing we do to actively sort of punish them, so to speak. But we do take note, and and we can of course write to them and tell them that this is unacceptable behavior if there is something of that nature. So I don't know. I guess those are my initial thoughts on the subject.
Great, thank you. We're 15 minutes over, and I think out of respect to everybody's schedule, I should probably call an end to our the proceedings today. So first of all, I'd like to thank all of our panelists for giving us your time today and sharing with us your thoughts about the peer review process and how we editors go about our business of helping this process go smoothly. And also for everyone who took the time today to attend this session, I want to thank you. It looks like it's been a great success. And given that, we probably will continue to do these sessions going forward periodically. So we have your contact information, and we'll let you know. We also received pretty shortly a post-session survey, and you can give us more feedback about how we should possibly redo the presentation or make changes you might suggest to help us get better at this as time goes along. Well, thank you all for attending. I think it's been a great success. So with that, I close the session.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye all.
Bye-bye.